Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her back against the cold stone wall of the Carpathian cave, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The expedition had gone terribly wrong. What should have been a routine geological survey had turned into a nightmare when the mining explosions disturbed something ancient that had been sleeping in the depths. The creature before her defied every classification she knew. Standing nearly 12 feet tall, its obsidian scales caught the dying light of her headlamp. 6 eyes, arranged in pairs along its elongated skull, regarded her with an intelligence that made her skin crawl. Massive claws, each the length of her forearm, scraped against the cave floor as it shifted its weight. The local villagers had spoken of the Zmaj in hushed whispers, the ancient dragons that once ruled these mountains before retreating into the earth's bowels. Elena's team had fled at the first sight of the beast, abandoning their equipment and leaving her trapped behind a rockfall. The creature could have killed her instantly. Instead, it watched, studied. Its breathing was labored, and she noticed dark fluid seeping from wounds along its side where the explosions had caught it. "You're hurt," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the creature's rumbling breaths. One of its middle eyes fixed on her, and she saw something that shouldn't have been there. Recognition, not just of her presence, but of her words. The creature's massive head tilted, and it made a sound that was almost questioning. Elena slowly reached into her pack, her movements deliberate and non-threatening. The creature tensed, but didn't. "Attack!" She pulled out her first aid kit and held it up, then gestured toward the creature's wounds. The Zmaj's 6 eyes narrowed, and for a moment Elena thought she'd miscalculated. Then incredibly the creature lowered itself to the ground, its massive form coiling to bring its injured side closer to her. Elena's hands trembled as she approached. The scales were warm to the touch, and she could feel the creature's pulse through its hide, slow and powerful like a distant earthquake. As she cleaned and dressed the wounds with supplies woefully inadequate for such a massive being, Elena spoke softly. She told the creature about her work, about the mountains she'd studied across the world, about her respect for the ancient places that humanity had forgotten. The Zmaj listened, its breathing gradually steadying. Hours passed. When Elena finally stepped back, the creature regarded her with what she could only describe as gratitude. It reached out with one massive claw, stopping just short of her face. Elena, acting on instinct rather than wisdom, reached up and touched the creature's scaled hand. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Images flooded her mind, the mountains as they were centuries ago, teeming with creatures like this. The slow retreat into darkness as humanity spread across the land. The loneliness of being the last of its kind, sleeping away the centuries until the explosions woke it to find a world completely changed. When the vision ended, tears were streaming down Elena's face. The creature, she somehow knew now, was not a monster. He was a guardian, a keeper of the old ways, and profoundly, devastatingly alone. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry we woke you to this." The Zmaj made a sound that might have been forgiveness, or perhaps understanding. He rose to his full height and looked toward the cave entrance. Then, with a gentleness that belied his massive size, he scooped Elena up and carried her toward the surface, toward the world that would never be the same for either of them. 3 months after the cave incident, Elena stood in the converted warehouse on the outskirts of Geneva, watching the impossible sight before her. Casimir, the name the Zmaj had shared with her in their subsequent mental connections, was carefully painting with a brush held delicately in his claws. The artwork was hauntingly beautiful, depicting the mountains as they had been in his youth, alive with creatures that now existed only in memory. The warehouse had become a sanctuary, a place where Elena could work with Casimir away from the government officials, military personnel, and scientists who wanted to study, contain, or weaponize him. The United Nations had declared the situation a global security matter, but Elena had managed to secure protective custody of Casimir under the pretense of being his translator and cultural liaison. "The brushstrokes are becoming more refined," observed Dr. James Wright, Elena's colleague, and the only other person Casimir had chosen to trust. James was a xenobiologist, though nothing in his education had prepared him for a living, breathing dragon with the artistic sensibilities of a Renaissance master. Casimir paused in his painting and turned his great head toward them. Through their mental link, Elena felt his amusement at James's clinical observations. The dragon had developed something of a sense of humor about the situation, though it was often tinged with melancholy. "Tell him," Casimir's voice resonated in Elena's mind, "that I am not becoming more refined. I am remembering what I once was." Elena relayed the message, and James nodded thoughtfully. "The muscle memory is returning. How long since you last painted, Casimir?" The dragon set down his brush and approached them, his movements fluid despite his size. The warehouse had been reinforced to accommodate his weight, and specially designed walkways allowed him to move without damaging the floor. "Centuries," came the reply through Elena. "We were not always as you found me. Before the Great Retreat, before the hiding, we were different, more connected to the world above." "Connected how?" James asked, his scientific curiosity overriding his caution. Instead of answering through Elena, Casimir did something unprecedented. He spoke aloud, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. "We were guardians, protectors, humans. Were young then, needed guidance." Elena gasped. In all their time together, Casimir had never spoken English aloud. The effort was clearly taxing him, but he continued. "Your ancestors knew us, worked with us, until fear came." "Fear of what?" James whispered. Casimir's 6 eyes fixed on them, and Elena felt a wave of ancient sadness wash over her. "Fear of our power, fear of sharing the world, fear of not being the only intelligent beings worthy of dominion." The weight of that revelation settled over them. Elena understood now why Casimir had chosen to trust them. They represented something his kind had lost long ago. The possibility of partnership rather than dominance. "There are others," Elena said, not asking but stating. "Other survivors." Casimir nodded slowly, hidden, sleeping, waiting. Waiting for what? The dragon returned to his painting, adding careful details to a scene that showed humans and dragons working together to build something beautiful. A city that bridged the gap between earth and sky. Waiting for humans to remember that the world is large enough for all of us. Waiting for someone to prove that trust is still possible. James and Elena exchanged glances. The implications were staggering. If there were others like Casimir, if there was a chance to rebuild the ancient partnership. "What do you need from us?" Elena asked. Casimir's brush stilled. "Help me wake them. Help me show them that the waiting is over. That some humans, at least, have learned to see beyond their fear." The dragon's painting was nearly complete now, and Elena could see that it wasn't just a memory of the past. It was a vision of a possible future. A world where ancient wisdom and modern knowledge could coexist, where the guardians could emerge from their hiding places and take their rightful place alongside humanity. "How do we even begin?" James asked. Casimir set down his brush and looked at them with all 6 eyes. "By doing what you have already done, by choosing trust over fear, by showing others that coexistence is not only possible but necessary." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. They were about to embark on something that would change the world forever. The question was whether humanity was ready for it. The ancient forest of Białowieża stretched endlessly around them, its primeval depths unchanged for millennia. Elena followed Casimir's massive form through the undergrowth, marveling at how silently such a large creature could move. Behind them, a small team of carefully chosen individuals made their way through the forest. Dr. Wright, marine biologist Dr. Sarah Chen, and surprisingly 8-year-old Tomasz Kowalski, a local boy who had shown an unusual ability to communicate with animals. The boy is important, Casimir had insisted when Elena questioned bringing a child on such a dangerous mission. The young ones remember what adults have forgotten. They still believe in magic. 3 weeks of preparation had led to this moment. Through their mental connection, Casimir had shown Elena visions of the sleeping places, ancient sites where his kind had retreated to wait out humanity's aggressive expansion. The first was here, in the deepest part of Europe's last primeval forest. They stopped at what appeared to be a natural clearing, but Elena's trained eye recognized the artificial elements. Stones arranged in patterns that seemed random but weren't, depressions in the earth that suggested underground chambers, and in the center, a pool of water so dark it seemed to swallow light. "This is it," Elena whispered. Casimir approached the pool and began to make sounds Elena had never heard before, a complex series of harmonics that seemed to resonate through the earth itself. The water began to ripple, and Tomasz gasped in delight. "Something's coming up!" the boy exclaimed in Polish, his eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. The water erupted upward, and a second dragon emerged, smaller than Casimir, with scales that shimmered like green glass. Elena immediately noticed the differences. This dragon's eyes were larger, and bony ridges along its back suggested it was built for speed rather than strength. Dr. Chen stumbled backward, her scientific composure cracking. "Incredible! The morphological variations suggest different evolutionary adaptations." The new dragon, female, Elena realized, fixed her 6 eyes on the humans. Unlike Casimir's careful acceptance, this creature radiated wariness. She spoke in the same harmonic language Casimir had used, and Elena felt tension in the air. "She is afraid," Casimir's voice echoed in Elena's mind. "She asks why I have brought the destroyers to her sanctuary." "Tell her we're not destroyers," Elena said aloud. "Tell her we're trying to heal the damage." Before Casimir could translate, young Tomasz stepped forward. To everyone's amazement, he began speaking in the dragon's harmonic language, his child's voice somehow managing to produce the complex tones. The female dragon's posture changed immediately. She lowered her head to Tomasz's level, and the boy reached out to touch her snout without fear. The sight brought tears to Elena's eyes. It was exactly what Casimir had meant about children believing in magic. "She says the boy speaks the old tongue," Casimir translated. "She asks how this is possible." "Some humans still carry the old connections," Elena said, understanding dawning. "Some children are born with the ability to bridge the gap." The female dragon, who introduced herself as Alara, emerged fully from the pool. Her movements were graceful, almost dance-like, and Elena realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. A being that predated human civilization choosing to trust again. Dr. Wright was frantically taking notes, but his scientific detachment was cracking. The implications are staggering. We're looking at a complete paradigm shift in how we understand intelligence, consciousness, the history of life on Earth. Alara approached Dr. Chen, studying the marine biologist with obvious interest. Through Casimir, she communicated her curiosity about the ocean dwellers' work. "She wants to know about the waters," Elena translated, "about what's happened to the seas since her time." Dr. Chen, still shaking from the encounter, began to speak about her research. The dying coral reefs, the plastic pollution, the warming oceans. As she spoke, Alara's expression grew increasingly sorrowful. She says the waters were once full of our kind, Casimir translated. The ocean dwellers were the largest group. If they are gone, they might not be gone, Dr. Chen said suddenly, her scientific mind overriding her fear. There are places in the deep ocean we've never explored. Trenches that could hide entire ecosystems. Alara's eyes brightened, and she made a series of sounds that Elena recognized as hopeful. She wants to see the oceans, Casimir translated. She wants to search for the water dwellers. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. They had awakened one guardian, but there were others. Casimir had shown her visions of sleeping places around the world, in the Amazon, rainforest, in the depths of the Sahara, in the ice caves of Antarctica. We need to be careful, Elena said. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. The world needs to be prepared. Tomasz, still standing close to Alara, looked up at Elena with the serious expression only children could manage. They're not scary, he said in English, surprising everyone. They're just sad. They've been alone for so long. Elena looked at the two dragons, then at her small team of believers. They had crossed a threshold there was no going back from. The age of hiding was ending, and the age of awakening had begun. Then let's make sure they're never alone again, she said. The emergency session of the United Nations Security Council was in chaos. Elena sat in the gallery, watching diplomats argue, while Casimir waited in a specially constructed chamber beneath the building. The footage from Białowieża had somehow leaked to the media, and the world was in upheaval. The creatures represent a clear and present danger to global security, General Harrison was saying, his voice carrying over the heated discussions. We have no idea of their capabilities, their intentions, or their numbers. With respect, General, Elena stood to address the assembly. That's exactly why this approach is wrong. Fear is what drove them into hiding in the first place. Dr. Wright, who had been testifying as an expert witness, supported her. The evidence is overwhelming. These beings are not aggressors. They're refugees from humanity's expansion, and they're offering us a chance at partnership. Partnership. Senator Morrison's voice dripped with skepticism. With creatures that could level cities, that can control minds. They don't control minds, Elena said firmly. They communicate telepathically, but only with willing participants. Everything we've learned has been through voluntary exchange. The Chinese representative, Dr. Li Wei, leaned forward. Dr. Vasquez, you're asking us to believe that these creatures, which clearly possess superior physical capabilities, want nothing more than peaceful coexistence. Elena felt Casimir's presence in her mind, his sadness at the proceedings. Tell them, he said, that we do not want to be superior. We want to be equals. We want to be home. They don't want to be superior, Elena relayed. They want to be home. Earth is their planet too, and they've been in exile for centuries. The Russian delegate, Colonel Petrov, stood up. This is all very touching, but we cannot ignore the military implications. If there are more of these creatures, we need to know where they are, so you can destroy them. The question came from an unexpected source, Tomasz, who had been allowed to attend as a witness. The boy's presence had been controversial, but his unique ability to communicate with the dragons made him invaluable. Son, General Harrison said, his tone patronizing, adults are talking about very complicated things. The dragons aren't complicated, Tomasz replied with the devastating honesty of childhood. They're just hurt. You want to hurt them more because you're scared. The chamber fell silent. Elena felt a surge of pride in the boy, and through their link she sensed Casimir's approval. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been documenting the awakening of Alara, stepped forward. "If I may, I'd like to share what we've learned about their impact on the ecosystem." She activated a holographic display showing the Białowieża forest. "Since Alara's awakening, we've observed a 300% increase in biodiversity in the immediate area. Plants are thriving, water quality has improved, and several species thought extinct have returned." "They're healers," Eleanor added. "They don't just coexist with nature, they actively restore it." The Secretary-General, Maria Santos, studied the data. "This is significant. At a time when environmental collapse threatens global stability, these beings might represent a solution rather than a problem. Or they could be the ultimate invasive species," General Harrison countered, "reshaping the environment to suit their needs." Elena felt Casimir's mental touch, sharing images of the world as it once was, teeming with life, balanced, sustainable. "Show them," he said. "Show them what we remember." Elena closed her eyes and opened her mind to the connection. Through the chamber's sound system, somehow Casimir's voice emerged, speaking directly to the assembly. "We remember," the deep voice resonated through the chamber, "when humans were young, when you worked with the earth instead of against it. We remember the cities you built together with us, the gardens that fed millions, the waters that ran clean." The chamber was completely silent now. Casimir's voice continued, carrying the weight of millennia. "We do not want to rule. We want to teach, to share what we have learned in our long watching, to help you heal what has been broken." Secretary General Santos leaned forward. "What do you ask of us?" "Safe places to wake our sleeping kin, protection from those who would harm us, and time to prove that the old partnership can work again." General Harrison stood up. "And if we refuse," Elena felt Casimir's profound sadness, "then we will return to our sleep. And when the earth can no longer sustain you, we will dream of what might have been." The chamber erupted in discussion, but Elena noticed something important. The fear was still there, but it was being challenged by curiosity, by hope, by the desperate need for solutions to problems that seemed insurmountable. Dr. Li Wei raised his hand for silence. "I propose a trial period, 1 year, selected awakening sites with international oversight." "Seconded," said Secretary General Santos. Elena felt her heart racing. They were going to do it. Despite the fear, despite the resistance, they were going to try. "All in favor?" Santos called. Elena held her breath as hands rose around the chamber. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. Motion carries. "Dr. Vasquez, it seems you have your chance to prove that trust is stronger than fear." Elena looked toward the chamber, where Casimir waited, feeling his hope blending with her own. The real work was just beginning. 5 years had passed since that historic UN vote, and Elena stood on the observation deck of the new Geneva research station, watching a sight that never failed to take her breath away. In the valley below, humans and dragons worked side by side in the restoration gardens, vast spaces where the ancient guardians were teaching humanity to heal the earth. Casimir moved through the terraced landscape with grace that belied his size, his scaled hide gleaming in the morning sun. Beside him, a group of agricultural students took notes as he demonstrated how to read the subtle signs of soil health. His English had improved dramatically, though he still preferred to communicate through their mental link for complex concepts. "The morning reports," Dr. Wright said, joining Elena on the deck. James had been appointed as the first director of human-dragon cooperative research, and the years had transformed him from a nervous scientist to a confident bridge between species. Elena accepted the tablet and scrolled through the updates. The Amazon site is showing remarkable progress. The rainforest is regenerating at 3 times the projected rate. "Yuki's doing excellent work there," James agreed. The young Japanese dragon who had awakened in the Amazon had proven to be a master of botanical restoration. And the Ocean Project? Eleanor smiled. Alara's found them. 3 deep-water colonies in the Pacific. They're cautious, but they're listening. Through the glass, they could see Dr. Chen preparing for another deep-sea expedition. The marine biologist had become the primary liaison with the ocean-dwelling dragons, and her work was revolutionizing their understanding of marine ecosystems. What about the resistance movements? Elena asked. James's expression grew more serious. Still active, but losing support. Hard to argue with results. Global carbon levels are down 40% from 5 years ago. The desalination plants in North Africa are providing fresh water to millions. The vertical farms in the Arctic are feeding populations that were on the brink of starvation. Elena nodded. The path hadn't been easy. There had been attacks on the sites, attempts to sabotage the projects, political campaigns based on fear and xenophobia. But the results spoke for themselves. The dragons weren't just healing the Earth. They were showing humanity how to do it too. Elena! Tomash's voice came from behind them. The boy was 13 now, tall and confident, fluent in 7 dragon dialects. He had become something unprecedented, a true interpreter between species. Casimir wants to show you something. Elena followed Tomasz down to the gardens, where a small crowd had gathered around Casimir and a newly awakened dragon, Ember, a fire type from the Sahara whose specialty was soil remediation in extreme climates. What's the excitement? Elena asked. Casimir turned to her, and through their link, she felt his profound satisfaction. The seedlings, he said. Look at the seedlings. Elena looked at the plot of land that had been barren just weeks ago. Now it was covered with young plants, but not just any plants. These were species that had been extinct for centuries, their genetic patterns somehow preserved in the dragon's biological memory and coaxed back to life through methods that human science was only beginning to understand. How is this possible? She whispered. We are libraries. Ember's voice joined the mental conversation. We carry the memory of what was. Given the right conditions, life finds a way to return. Dr. Wright was already collecting samples, his scientific excitement barely contained. If we can understand this process, we could reverse extinctions, restore ecosystems, rebuild biodiversity. Carefully, Casimir cautioned aloud. Not all that was lost should be returned. Some things ended for good reasons. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. Elena felt a familiar presence in her mind. Not Casimir this time, but something larger, more complex. The collective consciousness of the awakened dragons, sharing their thoughts. The children are learning, came the collective voice. Human children. They carry the bridge in their hearts. This is how the future will be built. Elena looked around the garden and saw them. Children from a dozen nations, working alongside dragons and human scientists, learning to read the language of the Earth, to understand the connections between all living things. Tomasz was teaching a group of younger children how to identify the harmonic frequencies that plants responded to. A girl from Kenya was working with a dragon to purify contaminated water using bioengineered algae. Twin boys from Canada were documenting the behavior of reintroduced species. They're not just learning science, Elena realized. They're learning a new way of being human. Yes, Casimir's voice was warm with approval. The partnership we dreamed of is not between dragons and humans, as you are now. It is between dragons and humans, as you are becoming. Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. The scared geologist who had faced a dragon in a cave 5 years ago could never have imagined this moment. The world was changing, had changed, and the change was accelerating. The other sites are ready, James reported, checking his communicator. Tibet, the Andes, New Zealand, Madagascar. The local populations are prepared, the infrastructure is in place. Elena looked at Casimir. Are you ready? The great dragon lifted his head toward the sky, where the first stars were becoming visible in the evening light. We have waited long enough. It is time for the full awakening. As if in response to his words, a sound began to build across the valley. A harmonic resonance that seemed to come from the earth itself. The awakened dragons were calling to their sleeping kin, their voices carrying across continents, through stone and water and air. Elena felt the sound in her bones, in her soul. It was the sound of the world remembering itself, of ancient partnerships, reborn, of trust chosen over fear. The age of hiding was over. The age of healing had begun. And in the gardens of New Geneva, under the watchful eyes of dragons and the hopeful faces of children, the future was taking root.